2-4 is the percent equation, and it's very similar to the percent proportion, which remember was part over whole equals percent, and the percent was written as a fraction. So really all we've done is move the whole from the denominator over here, multiplied it on that side so it canceled, and multiplied it on this side, because what you do on one side you do to the other. And if you were in class, I explained that. If you're not quite sure what I mean by that, you can always ask me tomorrow and I will give you an explanation of that. But here is our equation, and it's using all of the same words as before: part, percent, and whole. And remember, our clue words are part, the word is, whole, the word is of. So those are our clue words into which is the part and which is the whole. Now, the one difference here is that the percent before we were writing it as a fraction. Now you need to write it as a decimal. So just looking at some of these, remember you move it over 2 spots to the left. 1, 2, so that would be 0.84. On the next one, you move it over 1, 2, and you have to fill that empty space. So it would be 0.06. The next one, you always move it 2 spots. It started there, so it would be 1.3, and you can have the 0 or not. It doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference with that 0 at the end, since it's in the decimal place at the end. And this one, now, a lot of people, when I say change percent to a decimal, if they see something like this, they think, oh, it's already in a decimal. But what we really mean when we say change that percent to a decimal is get rid of that percent sign. And in order to get rid of that percent sign, you have to move it over 2 spaces. So I think you have one that looks like this on your homework. I'm thinking it's about number 11. I'm not quite sure on that, but if you have one that looks like that, you still have to move your decimal over 2 spots and fill it in. Okay, let's get back to that. So it moves over 2 spots, and so it would end up being 0.00. How many zeros? 1, 2, 3 zeros, and a 4. Okay? So now, going to our actual problems. When you look at the problems, the first thing I always say is decide what the percent is. And in class, we used highlighters. And then what the whole is. And once you decide what those 2 things are, you know how to set up the equation, because whatever is left has to be the part. So in the first problem, what number is 65% of 98? Well, the easiest part is the percent. That's what I always start with. And the whole of 98. So we're finding a part of this whole thing. So that's my whole. And that means what number is has to be my part. Well, what number is, since we don't know it, we put a variable. So the part equals the percent written as a decimal, so move it over 2 spots, times the whole. Once you have that written out, now you have to solve for x. And normally you think of solving for x, of getting rid of something with it, but notice it's already by itself. So in this case, you only need to multiply these 2 numbers that are next to it. So you'd have 0.65 times 98, and you'd get 63.7 is the first answer. Then when you go on to the next one, you do the same thing. Find the percent. That's always the easiest to spot. And the whole. So it says 84 is 60% of what number? Now, of, the clue word tells you that's the whole. But another way to think of it is, it says 84 is 60%. Well, if it's only 60%, that can't be the entire thing. The entire thing is 100%. So that one has to be the part. It's only 60%, not the entire thing. So again, always start part. And I'm going to switch back to a different color. Equals percent written as a decimal. And you can have the extra 0 in there, but you don't need it. Times the whole. We don't know what it is, so we use the variable. Now this one's a little bit different because the x is in a different spot. We want that by itself, so we have to get rid of this number here. To get rid of this number here, you need to divide. It's just like a coefficient in a one-step equation. It's multiplication, so we have to do the opposite to cancel it out. The opposite is dividing. Divide by 0.6. Those cancel. What you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other. 0.6. And when you type that in, you'd have 84 divided by 0.6, and you would get x is equal to 140. So 84 is 60% of 140. And it kind of makes sense. If 84 is 60%, you're going to want a number bigger than that 84. The last one I think is the most confusing of all of the types. And it says 75 is what percent? Notice in this case there was no percent sign, so you know that's going to be our variable of 150. So we started off the same. The part equals the percent, times the whole. When we go to do this problem again, even though it's on the other side of the variable, this is like a coefficient. We could write that like this, and then you're getting rid of that coefficient. Either way, you should know, okay, I want this by itself. I'm multiplying, so I need to do my inverse, which is divide. 150 divided by 150 would just give me a 1x. What you do to one side, you do to the other. So in this case, when we find it, we would look at it and do 75 divided by 150, which you should already have an idea what this will be. It'd be 0.5. And then the only mistake that a lot of people make on this problem is that when it says what percent, you need to change that back into a percent. Before, when we were going from percent to not a percent or a decimal, you moved it to the left. Now if I'm trying to turn it into a percent, you go to the right. Fill in that gap, and it would be 50%. So the biggest thing is, remember, your part equals percent times whole, and always make sure that you write that percent as a decimal. That's the biggest mistake that I see people make here. Make sure you write it as a decimal. Even if it's already starting out where it looks like it's a decimal, you still have to move it to get rid of that percent sign.